Welcome to All the F Words,
a podcast where two writer friends, nearly 30 years apart, explore everything we give an F about. I'm Gabi Moskowitz.
And I'm Joanne Green. On each episode of All the F Words, we'll focus on a theme starting with the letter F. Things like family, FOMO, filibuster, yeah, maybe not, and femininity.
We'll share stories from our lives and our distinct generational perspectives, and we'll look to the experts for insights and ideas.
Today we're going to talk about Frankfurters. Yep, hot dogs. Where they come from, what's in them, why they're so beloved, and what a pescatarian like myself is supposed to do to handle a severe, and I'm talking serious, hot dog Jones.
A serious topic today, Joanne.
Gabi, it is important to mix a little light in with the heavy. The question is, after listening to all that we have to say about Frankfurters today, will people be turned off or will they be craving one?
I think that really depends on where this conversation goes. I have to be honest with you. You did the research. I personally am curious to know where this conversation is going.
First of all, can we be on a first name basis and just go Franks? Can we just call them Franks today?
You know, I think that might be a regional thing. I have never once called it a Frank or ordered a Frankfurter even. I always just said hot dogs. Growing up in Boston,
yeah, well,
did
that
you
doesn't
say
start with F.
Well, there's that. Yes.
Yes, definitely. In Boston, they were Franks. Franks and beans. A Fenway Frank at Fenway Park would be a hot dog.
That's just
so
good
yeah.
alliteration.
It's kind of like back in there in my distant memory. Okay, check this out. Americans consume 20 billion hot dogs every year.
Is that more?
That is crazy.
Well, I'm curious if that's more. Do we think that's more or less than, say, 25, 30 years ago?
I think it depends on how you define a hot dog.
Yeah.
Because, as you know, there are now a gazillion kinds of hot dogs made from absolutely everything, and including plants. And so it just depends on how it's defined. So what is a hot dog? It's a grilled or steamed sausage served in the slit of a partially sliced bun. That's the definition.
Okay.
So that sausage could be made out of anything, right? And I did a little research on where they come from. So actually there were two different origins for the hot dog. The Wiener, which is a Vienna sausage, or the Frankfurter, which I don't know how to pronounce this. It's German. Frankfurter Würstchen, like Wurst and then Chen. Würstchen. What would you say?
I think it's probably Würstchen. I think it's a Würsten. Würsten. The W would be a
I like
V
the way you
sound.
say that.
Yeah, I think. I don't speak German.
Würsten.
Yeah.
Culturally, hot dogs are from Germany, but they became popular in the U.S. because they were sold at stands and on carts, and obviously became really big when they became associated with baseball, which then associated them with America. And that was particularly true in New York and Chicago. So the history is that the sausages were given on the occasion of coronations and other imperial events dating back to the 13th century. How wild is that?
So are we expanding the definition of Frankfurter hot dog to mean any sort of sausage? Because one thing I've always thought was interesting in the food world is that nearly every culture has some form of sausage.
It is true. And you don't want to be there when they're being made. Right? You don't want to see exactly what's in them. I think that we're going to keep our definition to the sausage that is served in the slit part of a partially sliced bun.
Got it.
So if it's a sausage on a plate, or if it's a sausage that's cut into little pieces and baked into some dish, no, that's not a hot dog.
Got it. Okay, so we're
Fair enough?
We're focusing mostly on sort of the European preparation of like a milder sausage. And, you know, actually, there's a great, I think it's on Hulu. I think it was Padma Lakshmi's documentary series on Hulu. She did, I think it was The Foods of Wisconsin. And there was this family that had like a sausage and hot dog sort of restaurant. And they talked about the origin of the bun. Are you going to talk about the origin of the bun? Or I don't want to ruin it.
No, but if you have things to say about the bun, I'd love to hear it.
So the original reason that buns were served with sausages, and I can't remember exactly what country that was in, but it was just a holder. It was just a little piece of bread that was so that you could hold the hot dog. And the focus on like a brioche bun or a bun that was actually an intentional part of the meal came much later. I thought that was really interesting. It was there was no wrapper. The vendors would sell these sausages, which was the focus of the meal, just in a piece of bread so that one could hold the bread and eat the sausage. And you didn't necessarily even eat the bread, which, I think most people did, because it's like, I don't know. I personally think the ice cream cone is one of the most delicious parts of eating an ice cream cone, the cone itself.
Well, not just that, but you'd be touching the mustard and the relish, which would be kind of gross. It would be all over your hands.
Right. Well, but I think the toppings came later. I think that the bread was just a vehicle for getting the sausage into your mouth for a long time.
And that is why they became so popular, because you could eat them standing up or while walking. It was a grab and go.
Yeah.
And it was really the original grab and go meal, the meal that you could eat while running down the street, which, in New York, you see lots of people running down the street eating hot dogs. In German-speaking countries now, other than Austria, they're called wieners. In Austria, they're called something else. They're made from a mixture of pork and beef rather than the original Franks, which were always made from pork. And how did they get their name? Right, we would be remiss if we didn't say something about that. Hot dogs got their name because some sausage makers were accused of putting dog meat in them.
Oh.
That's pretty bad. Not because they looked like dachshunds, as I always assumed. Although there are people who say that is why. Consuming dog was actually popular in some parts of Germany in the 19th and early 20th centuries.
Well, our concept, I do think that it's important to point out, because I think we're going to probably talk about, different meats and what we think is gross and what we think is, quote unquote, normal and okay. I do think it is important just to hold that our concept of what is an okay animal to consume really is totally subjective. It has all to do with,
of course, culturally based.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So
I want you to know that Moxie, my golden doodle, is always in the room when we record, and not today. I just thought
we don't want to offend her.
I didn't want to, I just thought she's fairly balanced emotionally, and I didn't want to mess with that. So she's in a completely different room today.
That's good.
I mean, even the term hot dog could be offensive, don't you think?
Sure. Or exciting, depending on what she's into.
Do you know what is in a hot dog? Do you want to know?
In we're talking like a...
You probably don't want to know.
I do want to know. We're talking like a standard sold in America, like a ballpark Frank.
Yeah.
Okay. What's in a hot dog?
So a hot dog is comprised of meat trimmings and fat.
Okay.
So the deal with the meat is that it is MSM, mechanically separated meat. The next ingredient, and I can't make this up, is called pink slime. Third ingredient, meat slurry. And then added to that are flavorings, often including sweeteners, corn syrup, and preservatives. So what you might ask is mechanically separated meat.
What is mechanically separated meat?
What is, she says. It's also called white slime, to be differentiated from pink slime. It is a paste-like meat product produced by forcing beef, pork, turkey, chicken, any of it, under high pressure through a sieve or device that separates the bone from the edible tissue. And what ends up happening is you do get some amount of bone, marrow, skin, nerves, and blood vessels in there. A much smaller percentage of a hot dog is actual meat. What we term meat usually is muscle tissue. But mechanically separated meat, or white slime, can include all these other things. Pink slime, in contrast, is an additive, and it's used as filler to reduce the overall fat content. So it is lean, finely textured beef made into pink slime. But here's the thing about it. It's a paste, and then they expose it to ammonia gas or citric acid to kill the bacteria. This method is approved in the United States, but it's banned in the EU and also not done in Canada. So pink slime, this paste, to reduce the overall fat content, is also used in ground beef and all different processed meats.
You know, it's interesting. I think it's easy to... I remember hearing about pink slime when there was some expose on how McDonald's chicken McNuggets were made.
Sure, and the burgers.
No, the McNuggets. I remember pink slime is
the McNuggets.
like a part of the McNuggets. It's not, if you eat a chicken nugget, it's not like an actual piece of chicken breast. It's super processed and it contains pink slime. And while, you know, I definitely am a proponent of minimally processed food, I do think it's really important when you think about food justice. While I wish everyone had access to, you know, minimally processed food, I do think that it's worth just appreciating that the production of something like a sausage or a hot dog or something where the less desirable parts of the animal, you know, that maybe wouldn't necessarily sell easily in their raw, you know, pure form. The fact that there is a useful purpose, a widely consumed useful purpose for them is kind of awesome in terms of, you know, food waste and using, it's kind of weird to just think of hot dogs as truly honoring the animal from whence they came. But it kind of is like using as much of the animal as possible to create something useful and tasty.
I had never thought of it like that, and I'm glad you brought that up. The other thing is, I ate hot dogs throughout my childhood, and I'm really healthy, and, you know, I don't eat them now. I miss them terribly because I don't eat them. I think about them sometimes. I don't know that I could go to a ball game and not have one. But you know, clearly as bad as they were, and maybe they weren't as bad when I was a kid, maybe, you know, maybe all the chemicals and everything else that's in them, never mind the parts of the animal, but all the other stuff, maybe that kind of got added as food production became more and more mechanized, industrialized. But clearly people survive eating them.
I mean,
overall, right?
I think that it really is... I think it's a really tricky thing. It's so easy to think of meat as, if you're going to eat it, it should be in our sort of, we talked about this during food issues. What is the name again for the disorder of wanting everything to be orthorexia? You know, I think a lot of us, especially those of us who care about what we eat and think, you know, are really thoughtful about what we buy, it's very easy to become a tiny bit orthorexic. And I think it's pretty common, and where in our thinking of, you know, like if I was going to buying meat in my household is a whole thing because my husband keeps kosher. But, you know, in my fantasy, we would be buying nothing but pastured, locally raised meat. And I, you know, would only want to have organic and all of that stuff. But
I just had a really funny thought, Gabi. Basically, you don't want to kill the animal that's having a miserable life and is squished into a pen and never gets to walk around in the sunshine, but you are killing the animal that had a great life and walked around in a pasture. There's something wrong about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the concept of what we're okay with in terms of meat consumption is so personal. You know, it's
right.
It's not that I like it. It's not that I like the idea of that. But I also, the thing is, it's not just about the animal. It is about, I mean, of course, you know, I think there are probably a lot of people for whom it is about the animal, and there's no ethical way to consume meat. But I do think that because there is a market for meat, and because the farming of, or the raising and the butchering of sustainably raised animals or happy animals who have space to roam, is so much better for the earth. And small farming,
Also
I think
true.
there is something to that as well. So I also think, there are a lot of people who are really grossed out by the idea of hot dogs, but are totally fine with, say, American cheese, which is an extremely processed product and contains definitely some unnatural things in it. And I think it's tricky when we start saying, it's not so much tricky, but it's clearly a personal thing about I don't think it's so straightforward what's quote unquote gross and what's not.
Oh, not even a question. We are the only, I just listened to a really interesting podcast that was one of the New York Times Sunday reads on the Daily, and it was all about things that are disgusting. We're the only animal, we humans, who actually find certain things disgusting. And it was a deep dive into why and how we perceive things to be disgusting. I think a lot of it is how we're influenced. So what we're reading, what the trends are, all of that plays a big role. Do you know that Frankfurters are 500 years old? They turned 500 in 1987.
Interesting.
And they became standard fare at ballparks in 1893. And while people might think it was, one of the cities that's most known for ballparks, for Frank's hot dogs at the ballpark, it's actually St. Louis. It was a German immigrant bar owner who brought hot dogs to ballparks, and it just absolutely took off. When I say hot dog, what do you get any sort of feeling? Does it bring about any sort of sense of nostalgia, or do you associate hot dogs with a particular season or place in time?
I have a few associations. I think the first one is definitely my dad, because he did not contribute a lot in terms of the cooking when I was growing up, but he did barbecue, and he often barbecued hot dogs. But more specifically, we would go to Giants games when I was a kid, and he would buy himself a Polish sausage, and he would buy me a hot dog. And I remember sometimes wanting a Polish sausage, but I could never finish it because it was so big. Those definitely come up. And now in my life as a mom, my baby does not really eat hot dogs. She's a little young. But Anna, my almost 4-year-old, goes through phases where she's really into them. And the thing is, we generally buy Smart Dogs, which are, for those who don't know, meatless. They have a soy base. And I remember the first time,
not nearly as good. I want to mention, not nearly as good.
They're not nearly as good. I think the conversation about vegetarian, I've never had a good vegetarian hot dog or good vegetarian Frankfurter. I've had some very decent vegetarian sausages, and for me, they're kind of in their own category. They cook. You don't expect anything. Even the Beyond sausages, which are tasty, no one's getting fooled. But Anna, I remember the first time she had a real hot dog, her mind was blown because she was pretty happy about Smart Dogs. She thought they were pretty tasty. And then one time we had I think some Hebrew Nationals or
those are
A&S.
Good. Oh, those are good.
Hebrew Nationals, and then there's a brand I think it's called A&S out of New York. So my husband, Evan, who he's from Milwaukee, and I was really surprised to learn this, but Milwaukee has a pretty sizable Orthodox Jewish population. And so every time we go to visit his parents, we're able to stock up in the regular grocery store on kosher meat. And so not chicken breasts or things like that we can get at Trader Joe's here, but interesting ones like salamis, and Jack sausage is a great kosher sausage brand that we really like. And it's all cured and preserved, so we just bring it home in our suitcases. And I remember before we had kids, we would divide up. We would leave room in our suitcases and divide up who was bringing home the sausages, and definitely have been stopped at not customs, but going through security.
TSA. Yeah.
What's with all the sausages? But
such good smelling clothes you have.
So when Anna tried real sausages for the first time, her mind was pretty blown. Or real hot dogs. So those are kind of my primary associations. What about you?
So I have, it's also with my dad. My dad absolutely loved hot dogs. So for sure, eating them at Fenway Park. And I want to say the buns at Fenway Park still, at least a couple of years ago, the last time I went there, just looked like a piece of white bread folded up.
Was it like a
they
sausage
actually
roll?
make them, they make them to look, they're actually hot dog buns, but they basically just look like a piece of white bread.
Oh, kind of like a lobster roll bun, like exposed, with the white part. Oh, wow.
Yeah. The other thing I remember vividly is on Saturday nights, my parents would go out to the movies. And so my mom didn't want to really cook, and maybe they would go out to dinner too, I don't know. But they didn't want to cook us a whole dinner. So it would always be hot dogs and beans. Now, the beans were the canned beans that were like in, what was that, molasses? Boston baked beans?
Oh, and like a sweet tomato sauce.
Yeah, disgusting. I'm a huge bean lover in my adult life, but I hated those. So I would get SpaghettiOs instead with my hot dogs, and it was, really all about the SpaghettiOs.
Can I ask a question about your home preparation? So
Yes.
I saw my dad recently making hot dogs for him. He was going to eat a hot dog for lunch for himself, and he boiled it.
Yes.
And he never did that when we were kids. We would have hot dogs when we would barbecue. But I thought that the boiling was a little gross. But I know that that's a standard for a lot of people. Personally, I think when I make them for my kid, I would just pan, if we're not getting out the barbecue, I would pan fry it in a little olive oil. How were you guys preparing hot dogs when you were a kid?
Boiled.
Okay.
You got it. I think it's an old style thing. And then they would sort of puff up and look like they had a disease, like little bumps all around them. Yeah, boiled. I mean, in the summer, for sure, we would barbecue, but in the winter, it was too cold to go out. This was Boston, and so we didn't barbecue them. And I don't remember my mom ever doing pan frying them or broiling them or anything else. So it was boiled one season, barbecued the other season. The other thing was there was a restaurant, and I think it might even still be there in Boston, called Jacob Wirth's, and it was an old German restaurant that had been around since the 1800s, used to have sawdust on the floor, and this was my dad's absolute favorite thing, to go there and get, Frank's, we always called them Frank's, and sauerkraut, and he would have a beer, which was just like this enormous treat because there was never any beer in our house. God knows why. Actually, I do know why. It's because it was thought to be very caloric, and then my dad would get fat, and then that wouldn't be good. Don't even ask. Then my more recent memory, which is still going back 20 years, is eating hot dogs at Costco with my mom and my sister. Costco's wide aisles and smooth floors were one of the only places that my mom felt comfortable navigating with her walker. And, she wasn't going to hit any bumps and go flying, and she wasn't crashing into anybody. So this became like a really special thing. We would go there, and they used to have Hebrew National. I know that they don't anymore, but they used to. And we would sit there and we would put our mustard and our relish, and they gave out free sauerkraut. Do you remember this?
Yes.
I can't believe I'm being nostalgic about Costco.
Well, I'm very nostalgic about it. When I was a kid, we belonged to a pool in Santa Rosa where I grew up called the El Rancho, and it was in the back of this hotel. And my mom would take us, my brother and me, to the pool, and for lunch afterwards or an early dinner or whatever, we would stop at Costco, which was nearby, and we would get hot dogs and I think sometimes Polish sausages.
Big ones, right? They were really long.
they were enormous, and I remember their buns are different. Their buns are kind of big and sometimes like seeded, maybe it had sesame seeds, but they weren't just like little smooth hot dog buns. They were kind of big. Listener, you can't see this, but I'm gesturing with my hands to sort of make a hot dog bun. They were.
I vouch for this.
They were.
She's a hand gesturer.
Exactly. So yeah, big soft buns and great hot dogs. I totally remember that. It's definitely a kind of unlocked
And at
memory.
Costco, you also got a drink, a Coke, like in my case, a Diet Coke with your hot dog. And the whole thing, tax included, I do believe was $1.51 or $1.57. I can't remember exactly.
Wow. I don't think I was the one in charge of paying, so I don't remember, but I don't know if that was the same in the early 90s, but or maybe it was. Was that around the time when you were going?
Before, during, and after. As long
okay.
as they were serving them, I was going. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
70s, 80s, all of it. All of it. And so here's what I want to ask you as a chef and as a food expert. Is it easy to tease apart food that we like because we genuinely like the taste? Can we tease that apart from food that we like and really think we like because we have such loving associations with it for where we ate it and when we ate it and with whom we ate it?
Well, I just think that it's kind of an impossible question because let's apply that same question to music. You know, there are songs that I hear for the first time on the radio and I think, I really like that. Now, of course, I can ask my phone, what is that song? And then I can have that song. And then I can just have the song because I like the song. But for me, if I really think about it and tease it apart, as you said, it's often because the food gives, or the song gives me a feeling. It transports me somewhere. And I just think food, I mean, it's our first experience of being loved, being provided for. And I think it's really hard I don't think humans, maybe we were talking before about how, we're the only species that finds things disgusting. We also, I don't know anything about animals and their relationships to food, but if they don't find foods disgusting, I don't know how much they have comfort foods in the same way we do. And I think that our emotional connection to what we eat is just so deeply there from the very beginning. And I don't know if it's even possible. And I don't even know if I'm interested in just in having like a relationship with a food that isn't at all emotional. Like we talk about don't eat your feelings, and sure, don't decline to feel your feelings and replace them with food. But there's no separating the consumption.
Oh, is that what I did all those years? I think so, yeah.
Well, I think we all do to a certain extent, but I also think that, having a healthy relationship with food involves eating foods that make you feel good and, remind you of comfort. A lot of comfort foods don't just come from being cheesy or greasy or soft or, special in that way, but also things that were significant in one's childhood. And I also think, there are no bad foods. The only foods you shouldn't eat are foods that you're allergic to or foods you don't like. And there is room in a thoughtful diet for all foods, including ones that maybe aren't stereotypically healthy, like hot dogs. So, yeah.
All right. So here's my question.
Sure.
If I call myself I think pescatarian's just such a funny word, but basically I eat fish and fruits and vegetables and grains and don't eat chicken or turkey or meat. Can I make a special exception for hot dogs, like every now and then, like maybe on my birthday or something?
Do you know about the olive rule in kashrut, in keeping kosher?
I do not.
Okay, so Evan taught me about this. And so there's this rule that if you're eating something and then you find out that there's some component of it that's not kosher, you don't have to freak out about it if the amount that's in what you were eating is no more than an olive, right? So let's say you're eating. So one time we went out to a Mexican restaurant and he found out, or he found a little piece of chicken, I think it was. He only eats hechshered meat, right? So meat that is specially butchered in a kosher way. So we were out at a Mexican restaurant. He'd ordered a vegetarian dish. He found a little piece of chicken. And instead of freaking out, he explained the olive rule to me. He said, well, it's smaller than an olive. Therefore, it's not contaminating my dish. Now, I sure was eating something absolutely not kosher. And to me, I don't care about keeping kosher. But I do think about the olive rule a lot when I think about moderation. And if there's something that I don't want to do on a regular basis, I try to apply it. I try to apply the concept of the olive rule to the grand scheme of things in terms of how I'm consuming. So I think if you have a hot dog on your birthday or at a baseball game, and then you eat the way that you intentionally want to eat the rest of the time, it's about, in terms of the grand scheme of your consumption, it's about a percentage of an olive. So, or you could even.
I'm also thinking that at some point in the world, there must be a really, really enormous olive. Mm-hmm. And it could be that olive that I'm using as a standard.
But also, it's like the good that you are doing for the world and for yourself by eating the way that you want to eat is not going to be undone. Because like that hot dog is still going to be produced. And I just think that life is short. And I don't.
But it's a slippery slope, Gabi. It's a very slippery slope.
Oh, I think maybe just choose a few times a year. But I think cultivating a relationship with moderation is important. And I hereby give you permission to eat hot dogs whenever you want. And I think it's okay.
Oh, and I have another one for you and ultimately, I guess, for Evan, which is that when that happens, when you find a little piece of chicken in your vegetarian burrito at a Mexican restaurant, that, my friend, is a trafic accident. For those of you who don't know, trafe is the word for all things that are not kosher. Get it?
Oh,
She's
don't
Gabi
have to be a
Moskowitz.
dad.
I'm Joanne Green. You don't have to be a dad. You just have to live with one to have daddy humor. It is so true. And I'm sure that Evan is starting down that proud road of engaging in daddy humor now that he has 2 kids.
Oh, long before he had children, he was engaging in that. Yeah.
It just comes with the territory. Thanks so much for listening today. I hope we didn't gross you out in any way, but, there's just something so nostalgic about Franks, and they are over 500 years old, so we wanted to give them some props today on all the F words. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts. That would be iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, here, there, and everywhere. And please follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. We are at All the F Words Pod, which is also our email address, allthefwordspod@gmail.com. We hope to hear from you. Bye.